Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of r/ProRevenge. In today's episode, Revenge of the Construction Workers. Don't mess with Sandra. Teacher makes false claim of me faking an injury, so my mom messes with her career. Before we get started, make sure to subscribe so you will never miss a video. So let's get started. Revenge of the Construction Workers. I am a teacher, and when I was younger, I would take summer jobs to supplement my income. One summer, I worked for a bricklayer named Jerry and heard an amazing story. I worked for Jerry in the mid-90s, so the story either happened in the early 90s or in the 80s. Here goes. The setting for the story was a community of small rural towns, which had only one brick contractor. Jerry began his career as a bricklayer working for this contractor, a real jerk. Jerk and Jerk's son, adult working the business with his father, would harass, belittle, and humiliate all their employees on a regular basis. No work was ever good enough and employees were told they weren't worth what they were paid. Not only did Jerk mistreat his employees, but he was equally rude to other subcontractors and to the general contractors who hired him. Since he was the only bricklayer in the community, there was nothing anyone could do about it. Needless to say, the turnover rate for the brick business was very high. The only person that stuck with Jerk and company was Jerry. Jerry told me that his father had instilled a self-confidence in him that Jerry could do anything he set his mind to do, and that he should not evaluate himself according to what others said, but rather by the facts. Although Jerry was belittled by Jerk and son as were all other employees, Jerry was becoming a very good bricklayer. Jerry knew he was good. Jerk knew Jerry was good, but Jerk didn't know that Jerry knew he was good. Not only was Jerry a good bricklayer, he was very respectful to the boss who disrespected him. Jerk thought that Jerry was a naive pushover who was buying his head games. That would prove to be a huge mistake on his part. One day, Jerry was doing an exceptionally good job of laying brick. Not only was his craftsmanship amazing, he was laying brick at a high rate of speed, so that he was making his boss lots of money. Of course, Jerk and son were belittling his work as though he was doing the very opposite. This scenario was being observed by the general contractor of the project. After work that day, the general contractor asked Jerry to stay behind so he could talk to him. As did every other construction worker in the community, general contractor hated working with Jerk. General contractor told Jerry that he had heard Jerk and son belittling him, and told him that he disagreed with everything Jerk was saying. He asked Jerry if he had ever considered going into business for himself. Jerry said that he would like to do that someday. General contractor then said that he would loan Jerry the money to buy a mixer, the most expensive piece of equipment needed to start a brick business, if Jerry would indeed start said business. The only hitch was that Jerry would need to pay for the mixer whenever he could, and that he would subcontract under general contractor. Jerry agreed to those terms and prepared to begin his new venture. Jerry respectfully told Jerk and son his plans and gave his notice. The two mocked Jerry ruthlessly and laughed him to scorn. Jerk told Jerry, "You'll be back in 2 months begging to return to your job. You'll never make it as a subcontractor." 2 months later, rather than collapsing as Jerk predicted, Jerry was still in business and going strong. 1 year later, Jerry's business was booming and a drunk Jerk showed up at Jerry's house and begged him to come back to work with Jerk and son. "Jerry, you're the best employee I ever had." Jerry replied, "Why didn't you ever tell me that when I was working for you?" Jerk couldn't answer the question, and Jerry obviously didn't accept the offer for employment. 2 years after beginning his entrepreneurial adventure, Jerry heard that Jerk and son went out of business. Jerry said that he never intended to harm Jerk and son when he accepted general contractor's offer. He said that looking back on things he realized that he had become Jerk's greatest nightmare. "I can't say that general contractor intended no harm." I thought the most amazing thing about the story was how that Jerry maintained his self-esteem in spite of all the ridicule. I also gained a respect for Jerry's father who instilled an unshakable self-confidence in Jerry. Don't mess with Sandra. This tale was told to me as a warning when I started on my first post-college job. I am relating it exactly as it was told to me. This occurred in the early 80s, so those of you who've grown up with the internet may not understand how we did things in the olden days. There were no smartphone apps to show Q codes for airline tickets. They were paper. With red carbon mess. Reservations were done by phone. It was primitive by today's standards. Players' names have been changed, of course. Sandra, super sweet secretary loved by all, true, I worked with her. She was amazing. Fred, Sandra's boss. Tom, local VP. Big Shot, incoming manager from back east. Al, lead engineer on the team. This occurred in Salt Lake City, which, if you don't know, family was a huge part of culture. Even at work, family matters took precedence, and local management knew this and allowed for it. Well, Big Shot's office minions in another corporate location noticed some slight irregularities in time cards, like days off without pre-approved vacation requests. So he got himself transferred to the Salt Lake City office to straighten things out. He was pushy, and naturally, he was quickly hated. Big Shot ended up as a middle manager between Tom, at the top, and Fred. One morning, Sandra got a call from her daughter was unexpectedly in town and wanted to have lunch. Naturally, Fred and Tom gave her the okay. Big Shot didn't like that, although it wasn't explained why. Maybe it wasn't by the book, maybe he was upset that Sandra went over his head. In any event, he decided to stick his nose in. But rather than just say no, he dropped a last-minute urgent travel request on Sandra's desk, and it had to be done because he expected to fly out that afternoon. Sandra was heartbroken that she wouldn't get to see her daughter, but she had her work responsibilities. Stopping by to drop off some paperwork, Al noticed that Sandra looked a little down, a huge change from her normal chipper mood. He naturally asked why, and Sandra explained. Al told her he had no authority, by the way, to go have lunch and will take care of it. Big Shot got his travel packet, got on the plane that afternoon, and flew off to his meeting. That's when things started to go wrong. The rental car reservation was invalid, and there were no cars available at any of the agencies. All had a hold on them pending confirmation from some clients. So Big Shot ended up getting a rent-a-wreck. For those too young or not in the US, there really was a discount auto rental agency by that name. Quality was not job one. When Big Shot got to the hotel, he found that his reservation was no good. He had to wait around until after the tentative reservations expired, which was after 6 p.m. Getting suspicious, Big Shot looked at his tickets and found they were one-way. He had no flight home. To say Big Shot was incensed was probably an understatement. The next morning, Tom flew in to join him, and he gave Big Shot a packet that was marked extremely urgent that had been left on his desk with a note to take it to Big Shot. It was Big Shot's return ticket. On the way back, Big Shot detoured by the corporate head office and got a very senior exec to come with him because of some very serious personnel problems. The next morning, Big Shot led the senior exec and Tom into a meeting with all of Fred's department and began publicly berating Sandra for incompetence and so on. When he got to the part about the tickets, Fred interrupted and told the senior exec that Sandra couldn't have done that. She was on approved time off having lunch with her daughter. This raised the senior exec's eyebrows and got Big Shot even angrier. The senior exec said if Sandra didn't mess up the tickets, who did? Fred stepped forward. Then Al. And one by one, every single member of Fred's team stepped forward to take responsibility to protect Sandra from Big Shot's wrath. Tom and the senior exec knew instantly what had happened. Everyone on Fred's team had burned up the phones making tentative reservations for rental cars and hotel rooms, leaving Big Shot stuck with a one-way ticket, worthless reservations, and no alternatives. Within the hour, Big Shot's desk was empty and his badge had been turned in. It was never explained if Big Shot was fired, or if he was just quickly relocated. The senior exec stuck around to get to know the team. He was very impressed with how the whole team stuck together and protected their own. After he finished telling me the tale, the engineer said bluntly, "Don't mess with Sandra. We love her, and we will make you pay if you upset her." Message received loud and clear. As I worked with Fred's team, I got to understand why everyone loved Sandra. She was an absolute gem in the organization, efficient, super friendly, just an all-around wonderful person. Teacher makes false claim of me faking an injury, so my mom messes with her career. I apologize for the format, I'm typing this on my cracked phone screen. I, 15F, have had a long and elaborate history with injuries, especially breaking my arm. Starting from literally the day I was born, my health has been complicated. I have a few conditions but none serious enough to impact my daily life as I know it. I have a very weak immune system and somewhat easy to break bones. On top of that, I am the definition of clumsy, and I'm also a huge idiot who gets herself into dangerous situations for fun. My mom, 40F, has obviously known me from birth, and knows just the extent of my weird bad luck and health issues. I've broken my arms a collective 13 times over my entire life, and almost every time I got injured or sick, it seems somebody had something to say about it. IDKY, but teachers just love to say that students that get hurt often are attention-seeking fakers, and a lot of relationships with authority figures have been harmful because of this. Every time it's the same. For some reason a teacher doesn't believe me, they call me a liar in front of everyone, I get bullied for a while, and then I have to try and prove that I'm not faking. I could post so many stories about teachers doing this, but this is a story about the time my mom actually managed to get revenge. This all took place around 7th grade. I was 12 at the time, and I had broken my wrist by climbing on top of something I wasn't supposed to, and then falling off like a dumbass. My wrist was in a Velcro cast, since I'm very allergic to the regular cast material, as they figured out through many cases of trial and error. My teacher. Let's call her Mrs. Tablet since this took place while we were learning about Egyptian tablets. She taught history and our personalities clashed a bit. I'm more of a creative, adventurous, free thinker type, and she was very conservative, by the book, and proper. We hadn't had any real issues before this, but we just didn't mesh well. She was absent one day and we had a sub in. I knew the sub as one of my teacher's friends and one of my bully's mom. I didn't like her, but I was still respectful in class and just tried to get my work done. She got me in trouble for doodling on my paper once or twice, but other than that everything was fine, or so I thought. The next day I went into class like usual. We were working on an assignment about Egypt and their tables when Mrs. Tablet called me over to her desk. I went over, thinking she'd just get onto me for drawing on the back of my homework or something, only to get bombarded with a bunch of really weird questions. The interaction went something like, "Teacher, so Fire, do you know why I've called you up here? I know Fire isn't my Reddit name, but it's my IRL nickname, so I'm using it here." Me, "No ma'am, I can't say that I do." "Teacher, how long have you had that cast?" Me, "About a week now." "Why?" "Teacher, do you really need that cast?" Me, "Yes." "Teacher, well the substitute told me she saw you take it off." Me, "It's a cast, I can't take it off, it would hurt." "Teacher, so if I asked the class they'd say you need that cast?" Me, "Yes." "Teacher, and if I called your parents right now they'd say the same thing?" Me, "Yes, they were the ones that took me to the hospital." And she did this in front of the whole class. I was eventually dismissed and people looked at me weird for the rest of class. As I later learned, apparently the substitute had told Mrs. Tablet that I'd taken off my cast as soon as I left class. I didn't, and that I threw it in my locker like ha ha ha, I'm getting away with doing less work. So basically she pretended I was a bad guy in a crappy high school movie. IDKY she said this, but it had my teacher convinced that I was a liar and a fake. I technically could remove my cast since it was Velcro, but that would have been extremely painful, and it's not like I could just walk around without it. I wasn't going to make a big deal about it at the time, but it turns out she was serious about calling my parents. But she made the mistake of calling my mom. Now me and my mother don't have a perfect relationship, she has anger issues, so we don't always get along well, but she loves me very much and doesn't let people like this mess with me if she can stop it. According to my mom, Mrs. Tablet called her all cocky and said things like, apparently your daughter is wearing a cast, did you know that? And well, we all know how dramatic teenage girls can be. Especially unique kids like her. She apparently even threatened to have me suspended before my mom stopped her and tore her to shreds for talking about her child like that. I don't think I'm allowed to repeat what was said, but by the end, Mrs. Tablet had to retreat with her tail tucked between her legs. She started being even more cold to me after that day and started giving me unfair detentions for not sitting still and doodling on the side of my worksheets. Even then, outside of school, we went to the same art studio sometimes. Weird that someone who hates art so much likes to paint, and poisoned the art director against me and got me put into a lower class. When me mom found out about this, she started the real revenge. My mom has never been a PTA mom. She honestly can't stand most of the PTA members, and their kids are chosen as favorites at my school, and use this power to bully others, including me and my friends. My mom is, however, friends with a very lovely woman on the county school board, which has more power than the PTA. She told her friend everything that had happened and supplied all the doctor's notes needed to prove I needed my cast. Her friend managed to convince the rest of the board that Mrs. Tablet was discriminating against an impaired student, given her comments about me being slower at work and just wearing the cast to slack off, along with detentions related to me not sitting still when she knew I had nervous movements and slight ADHD. At the art studio, my mother pulled me from the classes. I took it upon myself to inform the fellow kids about why, and rumors spread quickly. Soon enough, kids were getting pulled left and right, and my art teacher was pulling at strings to try and get the situation under control. I actually think the studio went into temporary closure before reopening again. She was suspended for a week to go under investigation, and it turns out she treated a lot of the unique, as she put it, students in a similar way. She was verbally reprimanded by 2 different departments, and instead of getting her standard raise over the next 3 years, she'll only get half of that. Not only that, but she had to retake a course on how to properly treat students, and if she's ever caught to cross this line again, she'll lose tenure. She'll just be getting her bonus back at the start of next school year, and I'd just like to say that I hope she learned her lesson, smiley face.